Y'all, this man is so fucking embarrassing. We finna go to at home. What you walking up on me for? Because why we in Alta, he gonna do this fucking do it.
Simba, you deliberately disobeyed me.
The fucking store gonna say that walking up to me.
A king's time as ruler rises and falls like the sun. One day, Simba, the sun will set on my time here, and will rise with you as the king's time as ruler rises and falls like the sun. One day, Simba, the sun will set on my time here, and will rise with you as the new king. One day, Simba, the sun will set on my time here, and will rise with you.
Let me guess. You like Star Wars. You know, I've been in other movies. But you don't care about those, do you? I have one thing to say to people like you. I like Star Wars too. Director Krennic.
Lord Vader.
You seem unsettled.
No, just pressed for time. There's a great many things to attend to.
My apologies. You do have a great many things to explain.
I delivered the weapon the Emperor requested. I deserve an audience to make certain that he understands its remarkable potential.
Its power to create problems has certainly been confirmed. A city destroyed. An Imperial facility openly attacked.
It was Governor Tarkin that suggested the test.
You were not summoned here to grovel, Director Krennic.
No, it's...
There is no Death Star. The Senate has been informed that Jeddah was destroyed in a mining disaster.
Yes, my lord.
I expect you not to rest until you can assure the Emperor that Galen Erso has not compromised this weapon in any way.
So I'm still in command? You'll speak to the Emperor about it?
Be careful not to choke on your aspirations, Director.
Compelling, dynamic. For decades, he's been raising our spirits while lowering that distinctive boom.
The Force is with you.
Meet the man behind the awesome voice, James Earl Jones on Biography, beginning now on...
Hello, I'm Peter Graves. Welcome to Biography here on A&E. The winner of Tonys, Emmys, and an Oscar nomination, James Earl Jones was once described as an overnight success. In reality, it took him 15 years to become that overnight star on Broadway. I personally will never forget the power and the beauty of his performance in The Great White Hope. Today, few voices are as familiar to us as his, and yet because of a childhood speech problem, most of his early years were spent in silence. Although his friends say that James Earl Jones is quiet and easygoing, he's been at the center of some of the most intense firestorms ever to sweep the world of acting. Biography looks at the life of James Earl Jones.
Let's have some lively time!
I can't think of an actor who has the power of presence that James Earl Jones has on the screen.
How high is the pile on your desk?
About this high.
That's this high.
Although we are not that much different in age, it's easy to feel James as a kind of mentor. I suppose because I so much admire his work.
The Force is with you, young Skywalker. But you are not a Jedi yet.
He's like a force of nature.
I will do such things! What they are, yet I know not, but they shall be the terrors of the earth!
He should be in a Hall of Fame, if we had one. And he would and should be a national treasure.
This field, this game, is a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us of all that once was good, and it could be again. Oh, people will come, Ray. People will most definitely come. This is all different, all new since
James Earl Jones' roots trace back to the tiny township of Arkabutla, Mississippi. At the end of this path is the house where he was born.
The first time I came here, after childhood, that's been about 20-some years ago, I felt immediate warmth the minute I got on the land, because it was the land my bare foot had touched, after birth. And I call that a memory, but it wasn't here. He was here in feet,
James Earl Jones's great-great-grandfather, Bryce, was kidnapped as a child in Africa and sold to a Mississippi plantation owner around 1820. Bryce married an Irish indentured servant named Parthenia Connolly, and she secretly taught him to read and write and gave him her family name. The earliest photograph shows their son Wyatt and his family about 1908. It was Wyatt who bought the land where the next 3 generations of Connollys would live. Wyatt's third child, John Henry, would become James Earl's grandfather. John Henry's wife, Maggie, was part black, part Choctaw Indian. It was whispered she knew magic.
Grandmother Maggie, she was a pretty powerful woman, and in a sense it seemed like things were either going to go her way or they were going to go her way.
By all accounts, Maggie was a fervent, passionate woman, protective of her family, eccentric in her beliefs. John Henry was steady, calm, the dispenser of a very fair discipline.
The oldest of their 6 daughters, Ruth, taught school and was a talented seamstress. She married the son of a traveling preacher, Robert Earl Jones. It was 1931. 8 million people were out of work as the Depression deepened. Ruth and Robert Earl's marriage lasted less than a year. They separated before the birth of their only child, James Earl Jones.
When he was born, I had to go and pick up the midwife for him. And they charged $5 to deliver him.
It would be weeks before Ruth finally allowed her estranged husband to see his infant son.
And apparently he pulled the cheesecloth back, which is to keep the flies off the baby, and lifted the child, and the child began to cry. And he thought, either I have offended the child or the child certainly is offending me. He put the child down, and that was it with fatherhood.
James Earl would not see his father again for 21 years. His mother, too, would leave, going wherever she could to find work, though she did come back to visit. James Earl was raised by his maternal grandparents, Maggie and John Henry Connolly.
They were my parents. They were my real mom and papa, as I call them, and still call them, refer to them as mama and papa.
Hearing that schools for black children were better up north, John Henry bought farmland, sight unseen, in Michigan. 5-year-old James Earl and most of his family traveled north by train. They carried packed meals because they would not be allowed to eat in the dining car with the white passengers. The family's new home was in Dublin, Michigan, and they spent that winter in a converted chicken coop with rugs to cover the cold concrete floor. When they went to their first church service, the Connollys were the only black family.
And the white congregation didn't know what to do, so they sang a song. I guess the first one they could think of was Old Black Joe. Well, Maggie said, we should shoot the sons of bitches. John said, no, wait a minute. Maybe they meant it as a gesture of goodwill. Maybe they didn't know any other songs. So I got both those sides, the rational side and the radical side.
The move to Michigan was traumatic for young James Earl and the beginning of a lifelong struggle.
I know that he told me that he had a voice problem. It wasn't a big discussion, but you could see it in hesitation, in making sure that things were right before they were said.
I didn't know he was a stutterer until he told me one day, and I was stunned.
I remember my grandfather was the most proud of this bell-like sound that would come out of this grandchild of his, who was always tagging him around the barn, the farm, you know. And I remember the day we got to Michigan, and I was a stutterer. And he said, it's gone, that voice is gone. It caused him such pain, you know.
In fact, James Earl was virtually mute through most of his childhood.
When he was in grade school, he couldn't talk to you. If he looked you in the eye, he couldn't talk to you, he'd stutter. And if he looked away, then he could talk to you.
The teacher at the one-room schoolhouse tested James Earl in private so he wouldn't be embarrassed in front of his classmates.
I want to be politically incorrect for a moment and say that stutterers are funny as hell. And if anybody that makes fun of them or inadvertently laughs, I understand it completely. As a stutterer, it's not that I condone ridicule, but I knew why the kids were laughing at me behind me at Sunday school. It's so nervous-making. It creates such anxiety in everybody that you laugh.
James Earl moved on to Dixon High School. He was an A student and a member of the varsity basketball and track teams.
He was a very impeccable person, very quiet, very shy, very reserved. Very seldom did he speak. He was always friendly, but he very seldom spoke in high school.
English teacher Donald Crouch changed James Earl's life. Crouch recognized the intelligence within the quiet boy, and he saw his opportunity when James Earl wrote a poem for class.
He had this challenge, of saying, I don't believe that you wrote this poem. Say this poem to me. If you wrote it, then you will be able to deliver it to me. And James did. It was something that he had written, and of course that began, it just seemed to break something loose.
And he realized that the poetic rhythm was easier for the stutterer, like the operatic rhythm is easier for the stutterer to get through, because you have a path laid for you.
From that day, James Earl put all his energy into developing his new voice. And by senior year, the once silent teenager had become a class officer, editor of the yearbook, and the school's champion public speaker. Despite his success in school, his mother's absence was a painful void. Ruth's annual visits were bittersweet.
She would visit every summer as if she was a mom. And I knew she wasn't, because she's going to go away at the end of the summer. And that caused me a lot of disturbance, And whenever she'd arrive, the tears of her departure were already in my eyes, and I'd go behind the barn where I could just cry,
Although his father never visited, James Earl knew he was a struggling actor in New York, and they finally made contact one memorable day when James Earl won both a public speaking championship and a college scholarship.
And the principal said, why don't you call your dad? I said, I've never spoken to him. He said, well, it's a good time to talk to him, isn't it? Tell him you got your scholarship to University of Michigan. said, gee. He said, you can use the phone right here. And I didn't know how to use a phone. I didn't even know he had what number. So I said, I'll call him later when I get out of school. So I went to the neighboring town, Manistee. Went to the drugstore. It took me a long time to get the courage, and finally the druggist taught me how to call information, to get Robert Earl's number, and finally how to call him. And when I called him, I had nothing to say except I got this scholarship. He says, great. That was it.
1949, James Earl enrolled at the University of Michigan, only the second person in his family to attend college. To please his grandparents, he chose a practical major, pre-med, and worked his way through school.
At Michigan, I delivered the Detroit Free Press Sunday edition to the rooms in the dorm. I worked at the switchboard and tried not to listen in to people's conversations. And I posed, believe it or not, I posed nude in the life drawing class.
Attracted to the arts, he began acting in campus plays. He also joined the ROTC.
War of attrition, in which no quarter was given.
American soldiers were fighting and dying in Korea, and James Earl knew he would probably be called soon to active duty.
And I decided to drop pre-med and just take acting courses just because the girls were over there. I'd have a chance to meet a girl maybe. I'd have some fun before I went to the war and got killed.
James Earl Jones left the University of Michigan a few credits short of graduation to join the Army. But the war in Korea ended before he got there. James Earl spent his tour of duty stateside, and during cold weather training in the Rockies, his commanding officer asked about his future plans.
We're on a mountain, and he said, Jonesy, do you want to consider another tour of duty and go for the rank of captain? Another 3 years, you know? I said, I really like it here. He says, is there anything outside that you ever wanted to do? I said, yeah, my dad's an actor, and I've often thought, I had some in college, and I often thought of doing that. He said, why don't you go out and try it? The Korean War was over then. The Vietnam War had not started. He said, go out and try it. You can always come back to the Army. That was his advice. I took it and never went back to the Army.
Instead, James Earl came here to the Ramsdell Opera House in Manistee, near his family's farm in Michigan. Built at the turn of the century, this theater gave him his first taste of summer stock.
He did stage carpentry. He was the stage electrician, the stage manager.
Because even though I'd had some acting courses at the university, by then I didn't consider myself an actor. But I wanted to be in the theater, and so the hammer was the first thing.
In his second year, he began doing bit parts. He also took a stage name, Todd. It was at Manistee that James Earl Jones performed his first Othello.
His performance was so bad. It really was. He was over the stutter at that point. But he swallowed his words somehow, that it was like a big pan of mush in his mouth. And the performance, although the tone of voice was beautiful and the acting was superb, you couldn't understand what the man said. I've never confessed this to him until this moment, so this will be a revelation. But Todd, I love you, but it was a bad show. It really was.
Determined to be a professional actor, James Earl came to New York in the mid-1950s and was accepted into the American Theater Wing to study drama.
He struck me instantly as a remarkable talent. Very refined and accomplished. And this was during the time when we were all struggling in New York.
Invited to live with his father, James Earl supported himself by doing odd jobs, and he and his father would sometimes work as janitors together and discuss Robert Earl's obsession, Othello. Trying to understand Othello and his father were twin struggles which would bedevil James Earl for years. He would play the troubled Moorish prince brilliantly. His relationship with his father was another matter.
You're talking about fellow actor, the fellow actor. You're not talking about father-son. It never was father-son. And that's what I think he has a hard time understanding. Because he now wants to reap the benefits of being a father. And there are none, because that status never existed, and that state never existed. That is something that the DNA does not define.
Living together proved impossible. James Earl moved out of his father's home and into this $19 a month cold water flat. His first break came with a chance meeting on a New York City sidewalk.
James Earl had studied with Joe Papp at the American Theater Wing. They encountered each other on the street one day, and Joe Papp offered James Earl the opportunity to join in a landmark new project, the New York Shakespeare Festival.
Shakespeare in the Park led to other opportunities, and at age 32, he was suddenly in demand, on television and on stage. The high note was his role as Village in Jean Genet's controversial off-Broadway play, The Blacks.
I believe that the show The Blacks was responsible for avant-garde theater in this entire country.
The play's 3-year run helped launch several notable careers, including Lou Gossett Jr., Billy D. Williams, and James Earl's co-star, Cicely Tyson.
He didn't walk. I mean, he strutted on stage. Now, when he was off stage, he kind of walked, kind of lumped along, like, with, you know, and he always had his head, I don't know what he was looking for down there, but I'm sure he's found it since, because he was always looking down rather than up. But he had this incredible carriage on stage, and he was very handsome.
Stormed the building.
Or taught, develop whatever. Those were turbulent times in America. The Freedom Rides began, and in Mississippi, 27 blacks were arrested for trying to use white-only bathrooms.
I can testify that in the production of The Blacks, Jean Genet Blacks, it rode on that tension. It also rode on a very healthy social conscience. You could awaken the conscience. Martin Luther King was doing that, awakening the conscience of the whole nation about rights, about justice.
Although many saw The Blacks as a racial and political drama, James Earl did not consider himself political.
He is not politically active, but I would call James a political person. You cannot be black and be in America and not be political. You are political by virtue of your existence.
In 1962, James Earl won an Obie as Best Actor Off-Broadway and the Theater World Award as Promising Personality, with co-winners Peter Fonda and Robert Redford. While playing in The Merchant of Venice with the Shakespeare Festival, James Earl's career got another unexpected boost.
I was playing Morocco. George C. Scott was playing Sherlock. And Kubrick was casting Dr. Strangelove. And he knew he was going to use George as the general. But he wanted to see him play anyway. And he came to the park, he saw the production, and when he walked away, I had a job too. So I'm sure he thought, I'll take the black one too.
I think anyone who saw him and listened to him, to his natural abilities and his presence, felt that he had as good a chance of making it as anybody who ever lived.
Dr. Strangelove was James Earl's screen debut in 1963, but it would be 4 long years before he worked in Hollywood again. Meanwhile, in New York, there were hard times ahead. At one point, James Earl auditioned for role after role without success.
It was a time when I wasn't getting any work, you know, and I decided to reassess whether this was for me. And NYU had a vocational guidance center, and I went down there and got tested. And, you know, the old joke about it should have been a plumber. Well, they said maybe you should be an architect. And they meant it, you know, and there was some talent there.
He was accepted to the Parsons School of Design to study architecture, but an acting job came up and got his career back on track. In 1964, James Earl played his third Othello. Desdemona, his wife on stage, was played by Julienne Marie, and by the end of the production, she had left her husband for James Earl. After living and traveling together, they were finally married in 1968, just before he got the part that would make him a star. At the age of 37, after 15 years in the theater, James Earl Jones got his big chance. He would star in The Great White Hope, a play based on the life of boxer Jack Johnson.
My best planks for the right-hand uppercut.
In 1910, Johnson had stunned the world by becoming the first black heavyweight champion. His flamboyant ways and his relationship with a white woman whipped up racist indignation. The boxing world became obsessed with humbling him.
Well, it was one of those roles that every actor dies for because it has such an incredible arc. You start from obscurity, and then you become very famous, and then you truly have a tragic ending.
For the stage and subsequent movie version, Johnson's name was changed to Jefferson. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, one that almost passed James Earl Jones by.
He was one of two actors that I was interested in. Yaphet Kotto was the other. Yaphet was busy in Milwaukee. Jimmy was not. He was available. I went to see him. I think we met at the Edison Hotel. Jimmy was very shy, very almost reclusive.
This is who's going to play the great Jack Jefferson. The reason I say that is because Jimmy would always walk with his head sort of down, his baseball cap down like this, and his jacket.
I thought that there would have to be an enormous amount of work for him to move from a rather, as I say, shy man to Jack Jefferson. It was anything but shy.
Determined to prove himself, James Earl trained, a grueling daily ordeal of jogging in heavy boots, weightlifting, and boxing lessons. Yet despite the sweat and sacrifice, something was missing.
I knew that I wanted Jimmy to shave his head and to have a gold tooth.
When he came in with that bald head, yes, we all sort of went, wow.
And I walked into rehearsal one day, and the actress playing Mama Tiny, who was Jack Jefferson's mom, looked at me and said, we really like James Earl, but we understand why he had to go. They thought I'd been fired, and this new actor who was much trimmer and looked like a boxer, and with this shaved head, they thought, I love that story.
Hook him again. Down, hit.
There was no longer any doubt. James Earl Jones was the perfect choice for the most powerful stage role of the decade.
And this was the area where we had that big table where he worked out in the end of the play, and he used to beat me with a towel.
He took the towel from around his neck and started to snap it at her and started to pound her with it. It was in rehearsal here. I couldn't believe my eyes. I had nothing to do with that.
Under Ed Sheeran's direction, the play roared onto Broadway. The opening night was full of celebrities, including Bill Cosby. It was intimidating for James Earl.
It was though he was somewhat overcome by the intensity of the meaning of all this for him. And yet, at the end of that performance, the audience literally sprang to its feet. And that's when Cosby said, you got a monumental hit. This is an amazing play and a great performance.
No one agreed more enthusiastically than heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali.
He was so crazy about this play, and he had such energy the first time he saw it, that he barreled past the stage doorman, barreled across the stage, went right past Jimmy's dresser, and right into the bathroom where Jimmy was relieving himself at the end of the performance. And without a qualm, Muhammad Ali just said, "That was some great performance, man." It was something.
And again, the audience was roused beyond anything I've ever experienced. But there were a lot of negative comments about the play. There were negative comments in the black community about the play. You're talking about 1968 now. Just think of the history of this country in 1968.
It was a year of strife in America. The Vietnam War was dividing the country.
This nation will rise up.
The assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy ignited anger and rioting.
You also put a black man in bed with a white woman. First time I think that's ever happened on Broadway. Making love.
While there was no overt hostility to James Earl and Julianne's interracial marriage, the situation was different for the woman who played his mistress on stage.
A lot of the mail was extremely hateful, and that's always scary, particularly if there are death threats. But a lot of it was pretty stupid as well.
It's gonna get worse, you know.
I know.
You want to go along with it?
Along with you.
And hold right on then.
Every night brought sold-out crowds and thunderous ovations. James Earl Jones and Jane Alexander both won Tony Awards.
What do you think you're turning me off just looking at you? No, stay stiff at all. You know why? Does your honey bunch?
2 years later, the movie version would bring James Earl an Oscar nomination and a foothold in Hollywood. From then on, he worked regularly in movies, though mostly in supporting roles. But his new fame had a dark side.
I think what began to fall apart with my marriage with Julianne was that the high orbit of the stardom of Great White Hope began to send me into an orbit.
The pressures were too great. After many separations and unable to have the child they both wanted, Julianne and James Earl divorced in 1974.
There are some actors that you'll just say, make it bigger, and they'll make it this much bigger. If you say to James Earl Jones, make it bigger, you'll be replacing glass in the room. He will make it huge.
And on stage, it worked, because you have to play for the last row in the theater.
You think I weep? No, I'll not weep. I have full cause of weeping, but this heart shall break into 100,000 flaws, or ere I'll weep. Oh, fool, I shall go mad.
Over the next years, he would play the towering roles like King Lear.
Wipe thine eyes. The good years shall devour them, flesh and fell. They shall make us weep. Ah.
James Earl sought out other parts not traditionally played by black actors. For example, the slow-witted Lenny in Of Mice and Men.
There were certain groups that just didn't think that a black man should play a part like Lenny, who basically dominated by a young white friend, and the same with Paul Robeson. His portrayal of Paul Robeson was controversial. But what I've always loved about James is that whatever his political views are, when it comes to the part, the character, he'll play it truthfully.
Biography's look at James Earl Jones continues right here on A&E.
He tends to stay to himself, you know, which, that's his thing, you know.
Even to his friends, James Earl Jones is a very private person. And yet in 1978, he was the epicenter of one of the most intense offstage dramas ever to rock the American theater. The play was Paul Robeson.
I was asked to come down to Philadelphia, look at the show, and begin to work on the show, which I did. I went down and looked at it. But what I had to do to get into the theater, there were people walking up and down in front of the theater.
You got to remember that every actor, every activist, everybody in the country at that time were being asked to take sides.
And every place we played, in whatever city we played in, there were people who Paul's son had recruited to picket the theater.
He began to shadow the production. I mean, shadow it.
Paul Robeson was one of the most controversial figures of this century. Actor, singer, football All-American, graduate of Columbia Law School, Robeson was also an activist whose political beliefs made him many enemies. And after he was blacklisted in the 1950s, efforts were made to virtually erase his existence.
A whole generation of people, white and black Americans as well as others worldwide, grew up during the 60s and 70s without any knowledge that a Paul Robeson had ever existed. He wasn't in the books. None of his films were ever shown.
My name is Paul Robeson.
And I think James Earl Jones felt that he was really doing something honorable when he chose this major figure. After all, he did do Othello, and he done all of the major Shakespearean works, and he was a great man in our race. And I believe that was the basis for his choice.
At Rutgers, there was one thing lower than being Negro or freshman. Negro freshman.
Gone are the days when my heart was young and gay. Gone are my friends from the cotton fields away.
Isn't that lovely? Right outside my door, the famed Rutgers Glee Club singing one of my favorite songs.
Voices calling old black Joe.
But after 46 times, in the middle of the night, not so lovely. For the freshman, it's called hazing, and for the Negro, it's called something else.
And they had, versions of the script up to your knees, where they had written and rewritten and rewritten. And if the play had not been acceptable to Paul Jr. in its early stages, by now I knew it certainly ought to be if you really looked at it, because it was done with love and with care.
But opposition mounted. An ad signed by more than 50 prominent black celebrities and civic leaders condemned the play. Carl Stokes, a reporter for WNBC at the time, investigated the controversy.
But when I contacted several members of the ad hoc protest committee, as well as the conveners of the committee itself, no one would agree to an interview.
It boiled down in each instance that the reason that they were out there was in response to the plea from Paul Robeson Jr. I then went to Paul Robeson Jr. and asked him, why was he protesting the play? He said, because the play did not do his father's memory justice. What you're saying is it didn't live up to all that he was. He said, that's right. I said, well, is it possible that anybody could write a play that would live up to what you think your father was? His answer was, I don't think so.
Despite the picketing and the ad campaign, the play was well received.
I thought the evening was a good evening, and I thought James Earl was wonderful.
I was invited to the Paris Peace Conference, and I wasn't asked there to sing. I was asked to talk to about 2,000 young students from all over the colonial world, and I remember saying, I find it inconceivable that American Negroes could go to war on behalf of those who have oppressed them for generations against a country like Russia, which acknowledges the full dignity of the Negro. Well, that was a statement heard around the world. The press had a field day. The State Department invalidated my passport.
I think what happened was we all got caught up in the politics of the moment.
Do you have any reason after seeing this play why the ad hoc committee should have been trying to stop people from seeing it?
No, I don't. I can't think of any.
Do you think it in any way diminished Paul Robeson?
In no way. I think it made him a bigger man. It's tremendous.
Nobody knows you when you're down and out. In your pocket, not one penny, and your friends, you haven't any.
Some felt it's ironic that a play about a man who was the victim of intolerance and censorship would suffer the same fate.
And if you do succeed in silencing my voice by making me a non-person, there'll be another voice, and another voice, and another voice.
Although he continued to work in feature films, it wasn't until the Star Wars trilogy that James Earl Jones enjoyed popular movie success.
You have only begun to discover your power. Join me, and I will complete your training. With our
He became so closely identified with the role of Darth Vader, it was not widely known that James Earl provided only his voice, and that another actor played the character on screen. More and more, James Earl found himself in a tug-of-war between the financial allure of Hollywood and his love of the stage.
I consider myself primarily a stage actor, only because I got my training there. I consider myself a novice still. I don't know what camera it really is all about, and I don't know how that thing does, what that does to energy and emotion or feeling, you know.
In 1982, James Earl was again playing Othello, this time on Broadway with Christopher Plummer and Diane Wiest.
He's the perfect Othello. the way he fell in love with the role and his trustingness, you know, of Iago and his trust in Desdemona. And then how his heart would just break when, you know, that seed was planted and when he believed it. It was very incredible.
One night when Diane Wiest had a bad cold stands out.
We were at the end of the evening performance, about 11 at night, and I guess the medication wore off. And of course, I'm dead at the end of the play, but I'm dead and I'm coughing. Well, Jimmy sized up the situation. He looks over, and I'm trying, so I think, okay, just don't breathe. But then, you know, you don't breathe, and then this huge cough comes out, and Jimmy's going, Desdemona, dead. Desdemona going, and so to shield me, this man, he takes his robes, and he falls on me. He just sort of smothered me, really, so that he could finish his speech. And we could get on with the end of the show, and I wouldn't have ruined the entire night. He saved me. But that's the type of man he is.
Othello has a personal as well as a professional place in James Earl's life. His first wife, Julienne, played Desdemona, and so did his new wife, Cecilia Hart, who took over the role after Diane Wiest left the play.
It was wonderful to watch him. I thought she was excellent. And I believe she was the last Desdemona. I don't think there was another one after Cece.
Within the year, Cecilia gave birth to a son, and they named him Flynn. 1987 brought James Earl his next Broadway triumph with Fences, and the second Tony Award as Best Actor. But performing on stage night after night had become too demanding. The pull toward television and movies grew stronger.
And I had just seen James Earl on Broadway in Fences, and I remember thinking, after I saw the show, I thought, that's a man. He was so strong and masculine in that role. I thought, I'd like to see someone have to kidnap James Earl Jones.
You to come with me for a little while, and what are you doing?
I'm gonna beat you with a crowbar until you go away.
Whoa, wait, you can't do that.
There are rules here? Oh, no, there are no rules here.
When we did the scene of him walking into the corn at the end, just before I rolled the camera, he turned to me and said, one question. What happens to me when I go in there? And I didn't want to say this out loud in front of the crew, so I walked over to him and I said, I don't have a clue.
Phil wanted me to go up to the row of corn and put my hand through, and laugh. I said, I don't know if you know how silly this feels. Come over here and put your hand through and laugh at what?
So he said, well, what do I feel when I disappear?
He said, well, just laugh. Imagine that your hand disappeared. And
he said, why is that? I said, I think it tickles when you disappear. I think it actually tickles. And he loved that. So he did this bit of walking into the corn, and he laughed. And I just love that moment in the movie, and a lot of people have told me they do too.
Biography's look at James Earl Jones will continue.
You're advertising as your voice in the marketplace.
Add to the largeness physically of this man, the voice, and then you're done for. I mean, what can one say about his voice? His voice is the voice of the century.
I have no presumption or really any arrogance either about my voice, although it is what I'm known for. It's in a way is what pays the bills a lot too. When it comes to the job, it's the job, and you have that same person who is the stutterer.
James Earl's distinctive voice is always in demand, and as the animated character Mufasa, he portrays a regal and yet loving Lion King.
Look inside yourself, Simba. You are more than what you have become.
By the time I did the final one, we had decided that Mufasa, more important than being a king, more important than being a king, which meant I had to act grand and important and self-important and so on like that, he was a pauper. So I had to come down off the king stuff and just be kind of dopey, you know. So my kind of dopey grin is what they used on the animators used in the image of Mufasa. You did not see the face of the man who shot you.
In 30 years of television acting, James Earl Jones has made countless guest appearances and starred in 3 series, winning 2 Primetime Emmy Awards.
Jimmy does have incredible insights, enormous power, enormous sensibility, unlike any other actor.
But I still do not understand.
It was my son that killed your son.
Today, with his movies, television work, and commercials, James Earl may be seen and especially heard more than any other actor in the world.
This is CNN.
They may find it.
In the movie A Family Thing, James Earl plays a Chicago cop. Co-star Robert Duvall is a southern redneck who is stunned to discover that he and James Earl are half-brothers. During a key scene, James Earl added something unexpected.
We're sitting there almost like brothers and we barely know each other. But he carried it to a much larger and deeper and fuller degree by this wonderful, infectious belly laughing that came out. That made the whole scene go another way. That was really a surprising and welcome thing that happened. When we shook his hand afterwards, he said that was terrific.
That laugh is as much a signature of James Earl Jones as his deep bass voice. And it's something he credits his father for.
I think I learned how to laugh once I met him. I think I giggled up to that point. When I met him, I learned how to laugh. Ho, 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 ho.
And he's quite funny and doesn't take himself seriously. So often we see him playing very dignified characters. And he does it wonderful well. But he's also a very funny guy.
With gratitude and humility, we dedicate the 1991 Emmy Awards celebration telecast to comedy.
James Earl Jones wrote his autobiography with Penelope Niven. He'd intended to hold the first book signing in Manistee, Michigan, where his career began, but at the last minute, the schedule was changed.
So I called him up and I said, look, you promised me you'd come here. He said, there's nothing I can do about it. They've already got me set up. I said, but you promised me. Well, the next thing I knew, about 10 minutes later, the phone rang at the theater, and the theater manager was told, we will be in Manistee on whatever the date was, and it was his first book signing. So he did that wonderful favor for us.
It looked like the whole town turned out.
He seemed to make every person who came to that table feel they were important for the short time he had to speak to them, that they were just a gift of making them all feel important, even though he was, somebody so famous.
Jimmy has never changed who he is, and that's why I think that he's so beloved by so many of us. It never went to his head.
He's one of the most generous people, both on and off stage, that I've ever known.
James Earl Jones, I think, is the first stage actor of our time who happened to be black, who's made us forget to say, what a great black actor, and make us say, what a great actor.
He will live and die and leave a legacy of an acting career that will be unmatched.
I don't think that there'll ever be another James Earl Jones. Ever. He's unique unto himself.
I will remember him till the day I die. And if I live after, somewhere, if there is a life after death, I will remember James Earl Jones. And I will consider myself lucky to have met him and worked with him.
James Earl Jones, the grandson of a slave. He was presented with the National Medal for the Arts by President Bush in 1992. It was a high point in his life and a symbol of how he overcame tremendous odds through hard work and education and became one of America's most respected and acclaimed actors. And now let's see what's going on.
No intro, guys. We're going to get straight to the topic of the video here. So, as you guys heard a few hours ago, the news came out that Darth Vader and Mufasa himself, James Earl Jones, has passed away at the age of 93. So, yeah, this is shocking, but the long life that he lived, it was soon to be expected. But, wow, it's hard for me to take in a little bit, because obviously I've known about James Earl Jones and his work throughout my childhood as Mufasa in The Lion King. As a little kid, The Lion King was one of the Disney animated films I have always watched, because it was so good. It was so fun and entertaining, and obviously at the end of the day, as always, James Earl Jones' performance as Mufasa was phenomenal. It was iconic at this day. Then, even though years later, until The Force Awakens came out, that got me into watching Star Wars for the first time ever. And at that point, I became a Star Wars fan and loved the prequels, the original trilogy, and obviously listening to James Earl Jones' voice as Darth Vader. Also, iconic. Phenomenal and iconic in every way, and played one of the greatest Star Wars villains of all time. And by all means, I still will say this at the end of the day, that Mufasa and Darth Vader, voice-wise, will never be... James Earl Jones will never be replaced for those roles. In everyone's minds, including mine. There, of course, are good impersonator actors who do pretty good with those voices, but the real voice will always remain to be James Earl Jones. I didn't hear about this until I was on the Discord server of Chaos Media Entertainment, the creators of Transformers Downfall, the Downfallverse. The creator of that studio posted about the news, and that's how I heard about it. And that was news that I was not expecting at all. But everything has been so quiet with the actor of James Earl Jones, and nobody knew where he was right now. Nobody knew if there was anything wrong with him, although we know that his last role, of course, was the live-action Lion King and Coming to America 2 from Amazon Prime. Those were the last roles that we've seen James Earl Jones be a part of, and those two, for his appearances and roles, still was good. His cameo in the Coming to America sequel, as much as I wasn't the biggest fan of that sequel, his cameo was actually pretty funny. I will say 100%. It was funny and goofy. Like, this is gonna be so hard to think about almost every day, dude, because to the family of James Earl Jones and friends of James Earl Jones, I'm very sorry for your loss. This is heartbreaking. It is. No, it's... His role as Mufasa, at this day, will always be one of the greatest parts of Lion King as a story in general. A wise king talking to his son about understanding the balance of the circle of life, how iconic that line is, and then leading up to the remember who you are. That's... It's inspirational at the end of the day, and knowing that the exact actor of Mufasa and Darth Vader passing away at the age of 93. Yeah, it's hard to sink in for me. It is. This is insane. But at the end of the day, James Earl Jones is in a better place. He can now see his wife. And even better, he can see Carrie Fisher. At the end of the day, that's the good thing. He's in a better place, and he lived a good life. And he inspired so many people around the generation. He's gave two of the most iconic roles. Gave his acting the best acting in almost every movie of all time. I'm gonna miss him. I'm gonna miss him every day. Thank you, James Earl Jones, for giving us the iconic role of not just Mufasa, but Darth Vader as well. Thank you for giving us your most iconic roles. And may you rest in peace, James Earl Jones. Thank you. Thank you for everything. Well, that's all I gotta say for today's video. But this is my video where I express my thoughts on the passing of James Earl Jones. An absolute legend. Thank you. And may you rest in peace. Have a good day, everyone. The Mac Tech, signing out. Have a good one.
George has admitted that when he hired David Prowse, he thought that was his Darth Vader. This guy who's over 6 foot, 6.5 feet tall, fits in the uniform with a slight Scottish accent, and not a bass, but more like a tenor. And it's a very effective voice, but George thought he wanted a, pardon the expression, darker voice. So he hires a guy born in Mississippi, raised in Michigan, who stutters. And that's the voice, and that's me. I lucked out, you know. And naturally, I wanted to make Darth Vader more interesting, more subtle, more psychologically oriented. And, so he said, no. What we're finding out is you got to keep his voice on a very narrow band of inflection, because he ain't human.
You don't know the power of the dark side.
No, I am your father.
You daydream?
All the time. Yes. I think that's what I do in place of thinking, usually. So people say, what are you thinking about? Remembering things of my childhood.
How come you ain't never liked me?
Liked you. Who in the hell ever said, I got to like you?
I was an adopted child
of my grandparents, and I don't know how I can ever express my gratitude for that, because my parents would have been a mess, you know. And there were considerations about that. Where should I go? And that began to bother me when I hear those discussions at night. Where should James Earl go?
Let's get this straight right now. We'll go along any further. I ain't got to like you. Mr. Rand, don't give me my money come payday because he liked me. He give me because he owe me. Now, I done give you everything I had to give you. I gave you your life. Your mama and me worked it out between us. And lacking your black ass was not a part of the bargain, and don't you try and go through life worried if somebody like you or not. You best make sure that they are doing right by you. You understand what I'm saying, boy? Yes, sir. Then you get the hell out of my face and go on down under A&P.
And the winner is James Earl Jones.
How you been?
Quiet.
Yeah. You had a stammer one time.
Yeah. I was very quiet then.
James Earl Jones remained virtually mute for 8 years of his early life because of a stammer. Today, his regal bass has become one of the most recognizable voices in America.
I was a stutterer. I couldn't talk. And I became just a nonverbal person. I became a writer, you know. Donald Crouch in high school said, do you like these words? And I was then writing words of my own. He said, do you like these words? Do you like the way they sound in your head? He says, well, they sound 10 times better when you give them out in the air. It's too bad you can't say these words. He began to challenge me, to nudge me toward speaking again. And by using my own poetry and then other poets, he himself said he learned a poem a day in case he went blind. You know, he'd have a whole book of poems in his head. And he nudged me toward that, toward the you know, acknowledging and appreciating the beauty of words.
That's the category tonight. Words that sound great when spoken by James Earl Jones. And here to assist in the presentation of tonight's top 10 list is James Earl Jones. James? Here we go. Number 10. Mellifluous.
I've been trained for stage, and I feel I know what I'm doing. I have a better sense of my responsibility, but I love doing films. I love doing television. I think television is very, very important for the whole world. So I will not say I prefer one over the other. I feel perhaps more comfortable on stage, though.
I am a man more sinned against than sinning.
I lived in an apartment in New York City. I paid $13 a month for it, and that was okay. You know, it was we had no standards to live up to, except to just keep working.
You're the only person who can tell whether you have talent or not. And there's a certain point where you got to be really honest with yourself and say, yeah, I do, and I'm going on, or no, I don't. And your parents can't do it for you, your critics can't do it for you. Once you determine that, then there should be no room for doubt.
And you lucky I'm too busy to find you, girl. You're selling my clothes, my ring, my silver brushes.
Give me another chance, baby. I misses you awful.
Just don't come on with me, girl. Your Willie's in jail. You just smelling gravy here.
If you want to deal with pain, unemployment pain, look at the Asian community in terms of jobs on Broadway, off-Broadway, movies, TV.
You keep on depending on the goodness of the man's heart. Second base from the Dodgers as far as you'll ever get, because no majority ever gave a minority a fair share of the loot without force.
Number 9. Verisimilitude.
Still negative function. The Teleflex drive cable must be sheared away.
Fire the explosive bolt.
Roger.
Guppy. You said guppy!
What responsibility do you feel with a good brain and a powerful voice and a strong presence to somehow reach out to those young?
No, I have to do it in my work. I can't do it as a politician or an activist. I don't do that well. Probably because I can have a conversation with you that might be meaningful, might be, hot air. I don't know, but I can't do that in public. I can't hold forth. I'm not facile with words.
They told me that they was jobs here.
Go home, nigger. Goddamn scab.
You watch your mouth, Peckerwood. I've been called nigger, and I can't help that the way white folks is, but I ain't never been called no scab. And I ain't fixing to start up now. I go ton for ton loading coal with any man here. And when I do, I expect the same dollar for the same work. Sulishnaya. I find your lack of faith disturbing.
George thought he wanted a, pardon the expression, darker voice. So he hires a guy born in Mississippi, raised in Michigan, who stutters. And that's the voice, and that's me. I lucked out, from all these so-called handicaps. He first started using Orson Welles and thought Orson might be too recognizable.
Right.
And he called my agent and said, "Does Jimmy want a day's work?" They paid me $7,000, and I thought that was good money, and I got to be a voice on a movie. It was great fun to be a part of that.
But your name was not listed in the credits, as I recall.
I didn't want that.
No one knew
no.
whose house is this.
Carrie Fisher, and she's a little crazy, so get ready to run.
And she showed up, and we learned that Carrie and James Earl Jones have never met in real life, because in Star Wars, James was in a sound booth doing Darth Vader and had never been to the set.
And we had a very, little scene that was let it bounce off each other.
It's not funny anymore, James!
Then why am I laughing?
As they were approaching each other, Carrie said, "Dad!"
Will you tell Regis that you are his father? Please, I'm begging you.
I've been waiting.
I have too, Dad.
Regis, I am your father. Butros Ghali.
300 yards. Torpedo is detonated.
Now, you understand, Commander? That torpedo did not self-destruct. You heard it hit the hull, and I was never here. Contact Dallas. Give them the go.
I'm afraid if I dig any deeper, no one's gonna like what I find.
You took an oath. If you recall, when you first came to work for me, and I don't mean to the National Security Advisor of the United States, I mean to his boss, and I don't mean the president. He gave you word to his boss. You gave your word to the people of the United States. Your word is who you are.
Look inside yourself, Simba. You are more than what you have become. You must take your place in the circle of life.
How can I go back? I'm not who I used to be.
Remember who you are. You are my son and the one true king. Remember who you are.
My son works. What is he now? Neosinephrine.
I have no presumptions or no arrogance about my voice, you know. One would think that I might even be in love with my voice. I'm not, because it would be the most unfaithful lover I've ever had, because it fails me often. Fujitsu or the Fuji.
She loved me for the dangers I have passed, and I loved her that she did pity them. This only is the witchcraft I have used.
Mujiber and Sarajuro.
I'll trade you.
That's really nice of you, but that ball really is signed by Babe Ruth.
So is this one, with the rest of the 1927 Yankees.
Man. Murderer's Row. Lou Gehrig. Babe Ruth.
Heebie-jeebies.
Just give the audience the experience is the best way to convey an idea is through the feelings, through the experience of the characters.
You really pissed me off.
Okay, just hold it. Right there. I was hoping I wasn't going to have to do it this way.
What the hell is that?
It's a gun. What do you think it is?
It's your finger.
No, it's not. It's a gun.
Yeah, let me see it.
Get out of here. I'm not going to show you my gun.
One of the things Field of Dreams does to people, the father-the-son relationship, the importance of it, and the dream deferred, and the sense of a man letting his dreams become reality is so moving that the audience I saw it with in a crowded theater in Toronto, you could hear the sobbing.
Really?
So I understand you saying you picked up the screenplay, read it, and began to cry.
Realized that I was being taken on a ride, you know, and a very subjective one. I'm glad that affects other people the same way.
People will come, Ray. They'll come to Iowa for reasons they can't even fathom. They'll turn up your driveway, not knowing for sure why they're doing it. They'll arrive at your door as innocent as children, longing for the past.
The speech that James Earl Jones does always struck me in the sense that, not to say that James Earl Jones isn't an athlete, but it's hard to imagine Mantle or Mays or Williams ever articulating the sport the way he was able to. So you have a non-athlete articulate the sport that we all love and play till the streetlights come on, season to season. That's what's so remarkable about that movie, that like a chalkboard it erases and everything that was good could still be again.
America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It's been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time. This field, this game, is a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us of all that once was good, and it could be again. Oh, people will come, Ray. People will most definitely come.
Nobody can say what you are, what you should be, but you. And the freer you are from the influences of peers and society, the better you'll find yourself.
Jimmy, good friend and icon of the American theater, rest assured that our debt to you will always be borne with appreciation and grace. Go well, good sir, with the memories of this evening to warm your heart and light your way.
Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you deeply honored, mighty grateful, and just plain gobsmacked.
And the number one word that sounds great when spoken by James Earl Jones.
Oprah.
Yeah!